Millie's Diner was the kind of place that felt like stepping into a warm hug, an old-fashioned gem hidden in a quiet corner of Santa Monica. For Ava, a 30-year-old waitress with a radiant smile and a quick wit, this wasn't just her workplace. It had become a second home. After dedicating 5 years to this cozy spot, she had memorized every regular's go-to order and could navigate small talk like a pro, leaving patrons feeling like old friends. That particular evening, the diner hummed with its usual blend of lively chatter. At one table, older patrons exchanged juicy bits of gossip, their laughter punctuating the air. Nearby, college students hunched over open books and laptops, fueling their late-night study sessions with endless cups of coffee. The faint commentary from a basketball game flickered out from the tiny TV perched above the counter, blending seamlessly with the clinking of dishes. Ava moved effortlessly, a tray in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, her steps a dance perfected over years. Her mind was already drifting towards the end of her shift, imagining the moment she could finally kick off her shoes and relax. The familiar jingle of the bell above the door snapped her back to reality. Without thinking, she glanced up, expecting the usual, a regular in search of their usual. But the sight that met her eyes froze her in place. Walking through the door was none other than Jason Statham. Yes, the Jason Statham, the global action movie icon renowned for his tough-as-nails roles and magnetic screen presence. He wasn't donning any red carpet glam tonight, though. Dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, he seemed to be flying under the radar. Or at least trying to. But Jason's charisma was undeniable, and the energy in the diner shifted the second he entered. Whispers started swirling like wildfire among the patrons, eyes darting towards his table. The once casual hum of the room transformed into an electric buzz of excitement. Ava took a deep breath, gathering her composure. This wasn't the time to fangirl, she had a job to do. Putting on her signature friendly smile, she walked over to his table, her heart racing. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering inside. "What can I get for you tonight?" Jason glanced up, his piercing gaze softening into a disarming smile. "Just a coffee, black. And maybe a slice of apple pie, if it's fresh," he said, his voice calm, yet carrying a charm that seemed almost unreal. "Coming right up," Ava replied, masking her inner thrill with professionalism. As she walked back to the counter to prepare his order, the whispers in the diner grew louder. Regulars nudged each other, pointing discreetly, their excitement palpable. But not everyone was thrilled. Greg, a frequent customer known for his outspoken and often abrasive nature, sat at his usual booth, scowling. His disdain was as obvious as the grease stains on his flannel shirt. Ava caught his glare out of the corner of her eye, but chose to ignore it. Balancing a steaming cup of coffee and a perfectly plated slice of apple pie, she returned to Jason's table. "Here you go," she said warmly, placing the items before him. Jason offered a polite nod. "Thanks," he said simply, his tone as smooth as silk. Their brief exchange might have seemed mundane, but to Ava, it felt like a scene straight out of a movie. However, the calm didn't last. Just as Jason took his first sip of coffee, Greg's gruff voice shattered the relative peace of the diner. "Aren't you that Hollywood guy?" Greg sneered, his words dripping with mockery. "Jason, Stam, or whatever." The chatter in the room instantly died down as all eyes turned to Jason's table. Jason looked up slowly, his expression unreadable, but there was a calm intensity in his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice even but firm. "That's me." Greg crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair like he was ready to start a debate. Ava braced herself, unsure of what was about to unfold, but determined to keep the diner's atmosphere from spiraling out of control. Greg's voice cut through the quiet diner like a knife, laced with sarcasm so thick it was almost palpable. "I've seen your movies. You play all these big heroes on screen, saving the world, and all that. But tell me, what do you really do for people who actually need help?" The atmosphere in Millie's diner shifted, the lively hum extinguished as every patron froze, ears now tuned into the unfolding confrontation. Ava's pulse quickened as she glanced at Jason, noting the flicker of discomfort in his otherwise composed expression. Despite the obvious tension, he remained calm. "I try to give back where I can," Jason replied, his tone measured but sincere. "I support charities and causes that mean something to me." Greg snorted, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Yeah? Sounds like just another Hollywood PR stunt to me." Ava had been standing nearby, listening as the scene played out. But now, she couldn't stay silent. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "That's not fair," she began, looking Greg square in the eye. "Jason Statham has done a lot for people. He's funded programs for underprivileged kids, supported veterans, and contributed to causes that make a real difference. You don't know what he's done behind the scenes." The room seemed to hold its breath. Greg's eyes narrowed, his gaze locked on Ava. "And you actually believe all that?" he challenged. "Yes," Ava shot back without hesitation, her voice firm. "Because actions speak louder than words. It's easy to sit here and criticize someone when you don't know the full story. But he's out there trying to make a difference." "What about you?" Greg huffed, his face flushing slightly, but he didn't respond. Instead, he returned to his seat, muttering under his breath. The tension in the diner didn't completely dissipate, though, and Ava could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her. Then came the sound of footsteps, her boss, Mr. Whitman, emerging from the back of the diner. His face was tight with displeasure as he motioned for Ava to follow him. She approached him, her heart sinking. "What were you thinking?" he demanded in a low, controlled voice. "I wasn't arguing," Ava defended herself, trying to stay calm. "I was standing up for someone who didn't deserve to be treated like that." "This is a business," Mr. Whitman snapped, cutting her off. "Not a debate club. Greg and the regulars keep this place running. I can't afford to lose them over some Hollywood star." The words stung more than Ava expected. "You're firing me for defending someone who is being unfairly attacked." "It's not personal," he said flatly, avoiding her gaze. "I'll give you a few days to transition out." The words hit her like a gut punch. Millie's Diner had been her second home, a place where she had invested years of her life. Now it was all gone in an instant. The next morning, Ava woke up feeling hollow. Her routine, getting ready for work, walking to the diner, chatting with regulars, was shattered. But life didn't stop, and neither could she. She had to pick up her final paycheck. As she approached the diner, something caught her attention, a sleek black SUV parked just outside. Ava hesitated, her curiosity piqued. Who could it belong to? When she pushed open the diner door, her breath caught. The room was eerily quiet, the usual buzz replaced by the soft hum of whispers. And there, sitting calmly in a booth, was Jason Statham. Ava's heart raced as Jason stood, his presence commanding yet warm. "Ava," he said, his tone sincere, "can we talk?" Her steps faltered as she approached him, still trying to process the sight of him back in the diner. "Why are you here?" she asked cautiously. Jason's smile was kind, his eyes holding hers. "I heard what happened after I left," he began, his voice calm but tinged with concern. "And I couldn't stand by and let you lose your job because of me." Before Ava could respond, Mr. Whitman appeared from the back, clearly flustered. His usual air of authority seemed to evaporate under Jason's steady gaze. Jason turned to him, his expression calm but resolute. "You fired her for defending me?" he asked, his tone carrying a weight that made everyone in the room listen. "That doesn't sit well with me." Whitman stammered, visibly nervous. It's not like that." She disrupted the diner. "Greg's a valued customer, and—" Jason raised an eyebrow, cutting him off with a pointed look. "And decency? Is that not a valued trait here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ava looked between Jason and her boss, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Whitman's face turned an uncomfortable shade of red, but his lips remained tightly sealed. Jason let the silence hang for a moment before turning his attention back to Ava. His expression softened, yet his voice carried a firm sincerity. "I've been looking for someone like you," he said, his words deliberate. "Someone with integrity, courage, and the ability to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." Ava blinked, caught off guard. I don't understand, she stammered. Jason reached into his pocket and handed her a sleek business card. I run a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth. We're looking for someone who can connect with people, lead outreach programs, and inspire others. I think you'd be perfect for the role. Her gaze dropped to the card in her hand, the embossed lettering catching the light. Me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason smiled warmly. Yes, you. Real heroes don't need a spotlight. They act when no one's watching. You showed me that yesterday. The next week passed in a whirlwind. Ava said goodbye to Millie's diner, leaving behind years of memories, both bitter and sweet. Now, she found herself stepping into a sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling city. The sign on the door read, "The Statham Foundation." As the new outreach coordinator, Ava felt a mix of excitement and nerves. But any lingering doubts quickly dissolved as the team welcomed her with open arms. Jason himself was hands-on, attending meetings, visiting project sites, and rolling up his sleeves to get involved in the work. Ava soon discovered that everything she had defended him for was true. Jason wasn't just a celebrity with a cause. He was deeply committed to making a real difference. One afternoon, during a visit to a local community center, Jason pulled Ava aside. His tone was casual, but his words carried weight. You know, he began, that day in the diner, I wasn't just there for coffee. Ava tilted her head, intrigued. What do you mean? Jason's expression softened. I was scouting. Millie's diner is in a struggling neighborhood, and I wanted to see if it was worth investing in. Ava's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you serious? He nodded. Sometimes, the best investments aren't in big corporations or flashy projects. They're in people. People like you. A month later, Ava stood outside Millie's diner, but it was almost unrecognizable. Under Jason's new ownership, the diner had been transformed into a thriving community hub. The walls had been repainted, the menu revamped, and a portion of the space dedicated to free workshops for local youth. Several of the old staff had been rehired, including a few of Ava's close friends. Even Greg was back, though he was quieter and noticeably more respectful. The incident with Jason had clearly left an impression on him. One afternoon, Greg approached Ava, his usual bravado replaced with a rare humility. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice low. Wrong about you. Wrong about him. Thanks for setting me straight. Ava smiled, her tone kind but firm. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, Greg. The real surprise came later that evening. Jason gathered the entire foundation team for a special announcement. As everyone waited with anticipation, Jason turned to Ava, his expression one of pride. Ava, he began, you've done more than I could have ever imagined. You've inspired us all with your dedication and heart. And, because of that, I want to offer you something special. He handed her an envelope. With trembling fingers, Ava opened it, revealing a check. The amount was staggering, enough to pay off her lingering student loans and even buy a modest home. Tears welled up in her eyes. Jason, I can't accept this, she said, her voice breaking. Jason's smile was understanding. You've earned it, he said gently. This is just the beginning of what you're capable of. That night, Ava sat alone in her new office, the check resting on her desk. She stared at it, conflicted. The gesture was beyond generous, but a nagging feeling tugged at her heart. Why me? She whispered to herself, the question echoing in her mind. Jason's words from the diner replayed in her head. Real heroes don't need a spotlight. They act when no one's watching. Suddenly, the answer became clear. It wasn't about the money, it was about what she could do with it. She folded the check carefully and tucked it away, her mind already spinning with ideas for the next chapter of her journey. Sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't just change the world, it transforms your life in ways you never imagined. Ava pulled up to the diner, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. The familiar neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a flickering glow onto the empty parking lot. The place felt eerie at this hour, stripped of its usual warmth. She stepped out of her car, her breath visible in the crisp night air, and glanced around nervously. "Marcus," she called, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The stillness was unsettling. A figure stepped out from the shadows near the back entrance, and she let out a shaky breath. It was Marcus, his dark coat blending into the night. His face was tense, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. "Did anyone follow you?" he asked urgently, stepping closer. Ava shook her head, though doubt crept in. "I don't think so. What's going on? What aren't you telling me?" Marcus hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I didn't want to say this over the phone, but you need to understand how dangerous Jason is. He's not just laundering money, he's tied to something much bigger. Powerful people. Dangerous people." Her stomach churned. "You're saying he's involved with criminals?" Marcus nodded grimly. "And now you know too much. He won't let that slide, Ava. We need to act fast." Before Ava could respond, the sound of tires screeching pierced the night. Headlights appeared in the distance, rapidly approaching. Marcus grabbed her arm. "We've got to go. Now," he hissed. Panic surged through Ava as she stumbled after him. "What's happening? Who are they?" "Jason's people," Marcus said sharply, leading her toward the alley. "They must have been watching you." The two darted through the maze of backstreets behind the diner, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Ava's heart pounded as adrenaline took over, her mind racing with questions and fears. Finally, they stopped in a dimly lit alley, leaning against a brick wall to catch their breath. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing furiously. "What are you doing?" Ava asked, her voice shaking. "Sending proof to a contact," he replied. "Someone who can take this higher, expose Jason and his whole operation. But we need to stay hidden until then." Suddenly, a deep voice echoed from the shadows, chilling Ava to her core. "Running won't help you, Marcus." They both turned, and there he was, Jason. His calm demeanor sent a wave of dread through Ava. Dressed in a dark leather jacket, he stepped forward, flanked by two imposing men. "I told you," Jason said, his gaze locked on Marcus. "You should have stayed out of this." Ava stepped in front of Marcus, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Jason, don't do this. You don't have to." Jason raised a hand to silence her, his expression softening slightly. "Ava, I'm not your enemy. Everything I've done, every decision I've made, was to help people. Sometimes the means aren't pretty, but the ends matter. You think this justifies lying to everyone?" "To me," she shot back, her anger overcoming her fear. Jason sighed, his frustration evident. "The world isn't simple, Ava. It's messy. And sometimes, the only way to make a real difference is to step into the gray." The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats. Marcus clenched his fists, stepping forward. "Enough of your excuses. She deserves to know the truth about what you've done. Everything you've ruined in the process." Jason's gaze hardened. "And you think you're any better, Marcus? How many deals have you sabotaged to make yourself feel righteous?" The two men stood face to face, their words laced with years of betrayal and resentment. Ava felt trapped between them, the weight of their conflict pressing down on her. "Stop," she cried, her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about either of you. It's about what's right." Jason's expression flickered, a hint of regret surfacing. "Ava, you have no idea what you're stepping into. But if you want to walk away, I won't stop you. Just know that the world out there is far crueler than anything you think I've done." As the men behind Jason stepped forward, Marcus pulled Ava toward a side door leading to an abandoned building. "We're not staying to find out what he means. Let's go." The door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing in the empty space. Ava leaned against the wall, her chest heaving as the reality of her situation set in. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaky, "if we're going to take Jason down, we'll need more than just those documents. We'll need proof that can't be ignored." Marcus nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "Then we fight. For the truth. For justice. And for everyone he's manipulated." Days after the chaos, the Foundation's press conference became a pivotal moment. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled for space, and Jason stood at the podium, his calm yet resolute demeanor commanding the room. Ava stayed off to the side, her heart still heavy from the revelations, but now, clarity replaced the doubt that had plagued her. Jason began, his voice steady and deliberate. The Statham Foundation was created with one purpose: to make a difference. Over the years, we've faced challenges, but recent events have brought to light an internal betrayal that I can no longer ignore. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Marcus Wilson, a former associate, exploited the trust placed in him. He embezzled funds meant for our community projects, betraying not just me but the countless individuals we aim to help. Gasps rippled through the room as Jason continued. Despite this, we remain committed to our mission. This foundation isn't just about one person, it's about the people we serve, the lives we touch, and the change we create together. Ava watched as the weight of Jason's words settled over the audience. She could see the determination in his eyes, the same resolve that had once inspired her to believe in him. As the questions began pouring in from reporters, Jason answered each one with transparency, leaving no room for doubt about his intentions. When the conference ended, Jason approached Ava, his expression softer now. "Thank you for staying," he said quietly. Ava nodded, her voice faltering. "I wasn't sure if I could." Everything felt so twisted. Jason gave a faint smile. "The truth often gets lost in the chaos, but you saw through it. That's what matters." Over the next few weeks, life at the foundation slowly returned to normal. Ava threw herself into her work, determined to help rebuild the trust that had been shaken. She visited community centers, organized outreach programs, and connected with people whose lives were directly impacted by the foundation's efforts. One afternoon, Jason called Ava into his office. The tension that had once clouded their interactions was gone, replaced by mutual respect. "Ava," he began, "you've been through a lot, more than you signed up for. But you handled it with strength and integrity. I want to offer you something." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Ava's eyes widened as she read it. It was an offer to become the foundation's deputy director. "Me?" she stammered, looking up at him. "Jason, I'm not sure I'm ready for this." Jason leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "You're more than ready. You've proven yourself time and again. This isn't just about a title. It's about giving you the platform to make an even bigger difference." That evening, Ava sat in her apartment, the offer letter in her hand. Her mind replayed the whirlwind of events that had brought her to this moment. From the cozy days at Millie's diner to the high-stakes drama with Marcus, every step had led her here. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from Jason. "No matter what you decide, you've already made a difference. Thank you." Tears welled in her eyes as she realized how far she'd come, not just in her career, but in her understanding of herself. She wasn't the same person who had hesitated to speak up at the diner. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. A week later, Ava stood before a crowd at a community event, wearing her new title with pride. Jason watched from the sidelines, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. As Ava spoke about the foundation's renewed mission, she felt a surge of confidence. "Sometimes," she said, her voice clear and strong, "the path to doing good is messy and complicated. But what matters is the heart behind it and the courage to stand for what's right." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in a long while, Ava felt at peace. Jason approached her afterward, his smile warm. "Told you you'd be great." Ava laughed, the sound light and free. "Guess you were right." For once, they both chuckled, the weight of the past finally lifting. Together, they turned toward the future, ready to take on whatever came next. The security guard, now restrained by Jason's team, sneered through gritted teeth. "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming," he spat, his words dripping with malice. Jason crouched in front of him, his gaze icy. "Then start talking. Who are you working for?" The man let out a bitter laugh, refusing to answer. Ava stood nearby, her heart still racing, but her mind sharp. She picked up the fallen detonator, examining it closely. "This isn't just about the foundation, is it?" she asked, her voice steady. "There's something bigger at play here." Jason's eyes met hers, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Ava, What are you talking about? She handed him the device. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. I found emails on Marcus's computer. He wasn't working alone. There's a list, people they wanted to silence. You, me, and others connected to the Foundation. Jason's expression darkened as he processed her words. We need to figure out who's behind this. If Marcus and this guy were just pawns, then the real threat is still out there. Before they could continue, the police arrived, taking the would-be saboteur into custody. Ava watched him being led away, her mind buzzing with questions. Why target the Foundation? Who else was involved? As the guests slowly calmed and the gala resumed, Jason pulled Ava aside. You've done more than enough tonight, he said, his tone laced with gratitude. Let me handle this. Ava shook her head, determination blazing in her eyes. No, Jason. This isn't just about you. I'm in this now, whether I like it or not. We need to get ahead of whoever's pulling the strings. Jason studied her for a moment before nodding. All right, but we need to be careful. If they've gone this far, they won't stop until they get what they want. The following day, Ava and Jason began digging deeper into the Foundation's operations. They pored over financial records, project reports, and correspondence, looking for anything that seemed out of place. Hours turned into days, and just when it seemed like they were hitting a dead end, Ava stumbled upon something. Jason, look at this, she said, pointing to a series of transactions. These donations, they're all coming from the same shell company. And every time, the money gets funneled into projects Marcus was overseeing. Jason frowned. That's not just a coincidence. Who owns the company? Ava traced the ownership back to a name neither of them recognized, Lucien Carrington. Whoever this is, Jason said, his jaw tightening, he's been using the Foundation to launder money, just like Marcus. But why target us now? Ava's stomach churned as the pieces began to fall into place. Because we were getting too close. Marcus might have been their inside man, but he was expendable. Once you caught on to him, they had to cover their tracks. As they uncovered more about Lucien Carrington, a pattern emerged. He wasn't just a financier. He was a shadowy figure tied to criminal enterprises across the globe. The Foundation had unknowingly become a front for his operations, and Marcus had been his pawn. We need to take this to the authorities, Ava said firmly. Jason hesitated. If we go public too soon, we could tip him off. We need hard evidence, something they can't dismiss or bury. Ava nodded, her resolve strengthening. Then we expose him the way he's tried to expose us, by shining a light on the truth. Their investigation led them to a high-stakes showdown at a private gala Lucien was hosting under the guise of philanthropy. Disguised as guests, Ava and Jason infiltrated the event, determined to gather evidence and confront Lucien directly. As they moved through the lavishly decorated venue, Ava couldn't help but feel a surge of nerves. But Jason's steady presence grounded her. We've got this, he said, his voice low and reassuring. They reached Lucien's private office, breaking into his files and finding the smoking gun, detailed records of his illegal activities tied to the Foundation and beyond. Before they could escape, Lucien himself entered, flanked by security. He smirked, his confidence unnerving. Ah, Jason Statham and his little sidekick. How bold of you to crash my party. Jason stepped forward, his posture unyielding. Your game's over, Carrington. We have everything we need to bring you down. Lucien chuckled darkly. Do you really think this ends with me? There's always someone bigger pulling the strings. A tense standoff ensued, but Ava's quick thinking saved the day. She discreetly activated a recording device on her phone, capturing Lucien's confession. As Jason distracted him, she sent the files and recording to their contact at the FBI. The authorities arrived moments later, arresting Lucien and his men. Ava and Jason emerged from the chaos, their bond stronger than ever. You've got guts, Jason said, a proud smile on his face. Ava laughed, exhaustion and relief washing over her. Guess I learned from the best. In the weeks that followed, the Foundation worked tirelessly to rebuild its reputation. Jason and Ava's partnership became a symbol of resilience and integrity, proving that even in the face of darkness, the light of truth could prevail. And for Ava, the journey was far from over. She'd found her purpose, and she wasn't about to let it go. Ava stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "I'm no one's pawn, Whitmore. You've been playing games with people's lives to satisfy your own greed. It ends now." Whitmore chuckled, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But bravery without power is meaningless." Jason crossed his arms, his towering presence casting a shadow. "You've made this personal, Gerald. Your vendetta nearly cost lives, and it ends tonight. The authorities have enough evidence to dismantle your empire." Whitmore's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly regained composure. "Evidence? You think I've left a trail? Everything points back to Marcus and his associates. Good luck proving otherwise." Ava held up her phone, a determined glint in her eyes. "Actually, we already have proof. Marcus's emails, financial transactions tied to your shell companies, and even your attempt to sabotage the Foundation tonight. It's all been sent to the authorities." Whitmore's eyes darkened, and he stood abruptly. "You have no idea what kind of enemy you're making." Jason stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "The kind who hides behind money and power? Trust me, Gerald, I've faced worse." Suddenly, Whitmore's demeanor shifted. He reached for a button on his desk, and the sound of locks clicking echoed through the room. The air grew tense as hidden security guards emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn. Jason moved instinctively, placing himself between Ava and the guards. "Ava, stay close," he murmured. Whitmore sneered. "You didn't think I'd go down without a fight, did you?" But Ava, thinking quickly, tapped on her phone, activating a live video stream. The room was now broadcasting directly to the authorities and media outlets. She held the phone up, her voice steady. "Smile, Whitmore. The world's watching." Whitmore's confidence crumbled as the guards hesitated, realizing the implications of their actions being caught on camera. Jason seized the moment, disarming one of the guards and using his combat skills to subdue the others. Ava ducked behind the desk, clutching the phone as chaos erupted. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Law enforcement stormed the penthouse, arresting Whitmore and his remaining guards. The authorities confirmed the evidence Ava and Jason had gathered, ensuring Whitmore's criminal empire would collapse. As Whitmore was led away in handcuffs, he glared at Jason and Ava. "This isn't over," he hissed. Jason smirked. "It is for you." In the aftermath, the media hailed Ava and Jason as heroes. The Foundation's reputation was not only restored but strengthened by their efforts to root out corruption. Jason turned to Ava as they stood on the balcony of the Foundation's office, the city lights glittering below. "You trusted your instincts and stood your ground. You've proven time and again that you're more than capable." Ava smiled, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. "I guess some chances are worth taking." Jason nodded, his gaze steady. "And some partnerships are worth keeping. We make a good team, Ava." She laughed softly. "We do, don't we?" As the night stretched on, Ava realized she had found not only a purpose, but also an ally who believed in her as much as she believed in herself. And though the road ahead would surely hold more challenges, she was ready to face them, one step at a time. Ava stepped forward, her voice steady and unwavering. "Pawns can become queens if you underestimate them." Whitmore let out a derisive laugh. "Do you have proof?" "Your word against mine means nothing." Jason calmly held up his phone, the recording of Marcus's confession playing loud and clear. Whitmore's confident smirk faltered, replaced by a mask of panic. Before Whitmore could react, police officers entered the room, summoned by Jason's silent signal. The smugness drained from Whitmore's face as he was handcuffed, ranting about his power and connections. "You've built your empire on lies, Whitmore," Jason said, his voice steady and firm. "It ends tonight." Ava watched as the man who had caused so much chaos and pain was led away. A sense of closure washed over her, mingled with the resolve to continue making a difference. Outside, under the glow of the city lights, Jason turned to Ava, his expression thoughtful. "You've done more than anyone expected. I owe you everything." Ava smiled, her heart light for the first time in weeks. "Sometimes The right thing is worth the risk. Jason extended a hand, a warm smile on his face. How would you like to work for the Foundation full-time? Ava's eyes widened in surprise. Me? Really? Jason nodded. You have the instincts, courage, and integrity we need. The future needs people like you. Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. I'd be honored. As they walked away, the city stretched out before them, a canvas of endless possibilities. Together, they were ready to write a new chapter, one of courage, justice, and hope.